Well, hi and welcome back. I'm Christopher Perrin, and we are looking at Genesis 1. And you have already learned a memory verse, correct? I'm sure you remember it. It's Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, correct, God created the heavens and the earth. Very important verse and very well known throughout literature, Genesis 1:1. Do you remember what the word Genesis means? It's a Greek word, and it means beginning. The genesis of something can be the beginning of anything. So Genesis is a book of beginnings. It's the story, the description of God creating the heaven and the earth. And now, biblical scholars and theologians have studied this passage, this chapter, and especially the two chapters that follow it as well, for centuries. And there's a lot to it. There's a lot of ways that we could look at Genesis. But one thing is very clear. It states clearly that God created the heavens and the earth, and He did so out of nothing. In other words, the world isn't eternal. God is eternal. The world had a beginning in time, whereas God Himself had no beginning. That's pretty interesting. It means our Creator is different from His creation. He is qualitatively different. That means He's different in quality and nature because He has always existed, whereas the earth is not. And the earth and the world is something that He made. Now, we would expect that the world that He made, if God is like an artist, say, that His art, His creation, the world, will in some ways manifest His nature. It will have, as it were, the fingerprints of the artist all over that, and certainly we do see that. In fact, the Apostle Paul in Romans 1 says that we can even know something about the eternal nature and divine power of God just by looking at the creation. And think about those two words, creator and creation. And I'll just write them down here in my best handwriting, which isn't as good as I would like it to be. Creator and creation. Do you see a similarity in these two words? Well, they both have create in them. They both start with C-R-E-A-T. There's a Latin word creo, which means to create. And God is the creator. So the creation is something like the creator, and yet in some ways it's very different. The two are different. So by way of another illustration, if this is God, this circle represents God, and this represents His creation, the universe, we note that while there's some similarities, there's also a difference. There's what theologians have called a creator-creature distinction as well. That's different from some religions that say everything is divine and everything is really one. We call this monism. You don't have to learn that. That's just kind of something new that I'm teaching you. And the way we might diagram a view that believes that everything is divine and that we are all God together and that everything is eternal, that would be represented by just one big circle. But that's not what the book of Genesis teaches, does it? It teaches that there is a creator and He has created all things out of nothing. And while that creation is beautiful, in fact, we see throughout the Genesis narrative, God proclaims His creation good. It is good. It is good. It is good. Despite the fact that it's like Him and is good, it is not identical with the Creator. It's not identical with God. It is not itself God. Very important distinction. Well, I want to draw your attention to another verse in Genesis that is interesting and might even be worth you memorizing. You can decide if you want to or not, but let's take a look at Genesis 1:26. That's where we read, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth.'" So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. That's pretty important, isn't it? First of all, we read in verse 26 that God created man in his own image. And that means that in some ways, just like the rest of the earth has his fingerprints on it, the rest of the world, the universe, resembles the Creator in some ways, so does man in a particular way. He even goes out of his way to say man is created in his image, meaning in some way man resembles God, so that looking at a man is to see God in some particular ways. Isn't that fascinating? And what are some of those particular ways that human beings show forth that they're made from God? Maybe in ways that, say, animals and plants and the fish and the sea and the sky do not. Well, one way is that we are also creative. We make things. We make art. You won't find a bird's nest, a writer named G.K. Chesterton says, you won't find outside of a bird's nest a little statue of a man. You know, the birds making art of men, but you will see out of a home perhaps little statues of birds. We do art, and G.K. Chesterton says art is the signature of man. In other words, that's what makes us human. That's one of the things that makes us human beings. We do art, we paint pictures, we do sculpture, we compose songs, and no other creature does. Well, theologians, Bible teachers have also said that human beings are like God in that they use language. Here I am speaking, and there you are listening to me and hopefully understanding me. That's something that is unique to human beings as well. We speak. Just as God speaks and things come into existence, we speak too. And while we can't speak things into existence, we can still compose things. We can make things with our words. We can make songs and poems and books. And of course, as I've already said, we can make art. We also have emotions. We feel things. And we have the ability to make decisions and choices. Theologians have said these perhaps are some of the things that make us like God in his image. And notice one last thing. It says in verse 27 that we're made in God's image, but male and female he created them. In other words, we were created male and female. Human beings come as males and females, right from God's will and creative choice. And that's pretty important too. That means that despite our attempts to maybe think any way else, that's how we are created to be. Either a boy or a girl, a man or a woman. And of course, we're both together, males and females, are both in the image of God and both resemble God, despite the fact that there are some differences between males and females. I think that's pretty exciting. There's a kind of complementarity that the male and female together are imaging forth what it means to be creatures of God. Okay. Well, there's more to think about in this very rich passage, but let's leave it there, and maybe some of you will decide, in addition to memorizing Genesis 1:1, you'll also memorize, say, Genesis 1:26 or 1:27, some other great verses. All right, that's all for now. We're going to be coming back in just a little bit for some more teaching and study, and you're going to have a chance to read that excellent narrative that's in this chapter if you haven't already. I'll see you later.